Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 16 of Insights into Tomorrow, Microsoft's gaming monopoly. I'm your host today, Sam Whalen, and my co-host, Joseph Whalen. How you doing today?
Doing good, Sam. How you doing today?
Fantastic. We've taken a long hiatus from the show. The holiday break became the almost Q1 of 2022 breaks. But we're back. We're back and we're talking about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision and Blizzard. We're going to break it all down for you on today's episode. But really quick, just a quick summary at the top of the show. So on January the 18th, we're a little bit late on this, but yesterday's news are tomorrow's insights. January the 18th, 2022, Microsoft, you guys might know them from Xbox and from computers, announced that they were acquiring Activision Blizzard in an all-cash transaction valued at $68.7 billion, or $95 per share. Now, this is arguably the biggest piece of news in the history of the games industry, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at what this means, why the acquisition is so important, and honestly, why you should care, because you might, look at this news and say, well, how does this affect me? It might not, but we'll get into it regardless. In addition, we'll hit some key elements, some key elements that should be remembered in this conversation going forward. But before we get into all that, I want to remind you some show plugs. You can subscribe to this podcast and all the podcasts offered from Insights into Things. We're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Amazon, and Pandora. I know Spotify just introduced a 5-star rating system. So if you go in there and rate the podcast, it does help our numbers quite a bit. In terms of contact information, we can be emailed at comments at insightsintothings.com. Twitter, we are at insights_things. Facebook, you can just search Insights Into Things Podcast. Instagram, at Insights Into Things. And finally, all these links, as well as more information, are on our website, www.insightsintothings.com. But that's all the housekeeping for today. Let's get right into the program. All right, so starting off with what exactly happened here. Now we have the press release from Microsoft that I've pulled a couple excerpts from just because nobody wants to hear boring corporate speak. But I've kind of boiled it down here. So, quote, Microsoft will acquire Activision Blizzard for $95 per share, which we hit at the top of the show, a $68.7 billion purchase, inclusive of Activision's Blizzard's net cash. Now, when this transaction closes, Microsoft will become the world's third largest gaming company by revenue, and they are behind Tencent at number one. Tencent, if you don't know, is a mobile game company. They're out of China. They make a ton of money through mobile games. And, of course, Sony at number two, Sony being the main competitor of Microsoft. Now, the planned acquisition includes iconic franchises from the Activision, Blizzard, and King studios, King being the makers of Candy Crush. But games like Warcraft, whether that be World of Warcraft or... Is there another Warcraft game?
Yeah, there's a whole series of different Warcraft games that are out. Yeah.
Diablo, Overwatch, Call of Duty, which Call of Duty is a big one that we'll come back to. And like I said, Candy Crush. In addition to the global esports activities through MLG, or Major League Gaming, which is one of the biggest esports, I don't know, what would you call them, producers?
The organizers, yeah.
Yeah. The company has studios around the world with nearly 10,000 employees. Now, if we can see, there's a graphic you can look up, and we have it on this back monitor here. But some other studios included are Treyarch, Raven, High Moon, Beenox, Infinity Ward, Toys for Bob, which makes remakes mostly. But it's more than just, these big games here. These are your big things, your Overwatches, your Call of Duties, which we'll hit on more later on in the show. But it's important to remember just how many studios are being acquired now under the Microsoft banner. that you may not even think of. But some important points. Actually, before we get into that, Joe, what do you think about this acquisition when you see these big studios? Do any of these games jump out to you?
Well, obviously some of them do. I mean, we've got Call of Duty, we've got Diablo, we've got World of Warcraft. That's a little long in the tooth right now, but it's a huge franchise. One thing is important to emphasize is this, the deal is still pending regulator approval.
Yep.
So it isn't a done deal just yet. So I think it's important to point that out. I think it's definitely a huge deal as far as dollar value and the impact of the industry. I don't think it's game breaking just yet. I think we kind of have, assuming it goes through, you've got probably about 3 years or more before it starts having a huge impact because of existing contracts and rights management that's going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a special task force. Not task force is a bit dramatic, but there's a FTC group being assembled specifically to look into this to make sure that it's all square before this acquisition goes through. So it is still pending, but it's most likely going to happen. So we thought we'd cover it today. But some more important points for you. Like I said, Microsoft now becomes, or will become, if this goes through, will become the third largest gaming company by revenue. Just to put that into perspective, I was wrong. Sony's number one with gaming revenue at $25 billion. Tencent coming in at number 2 with $13.9 billion. Nintendo was number 3 with $12.1 billion, but Microsoft has knocked them out with $11.6 billion, which, those numbers don't make sense, none of them looking at them. But Microsoft will be taking that third spot for revenue. I imagine those numbers will probably go up for them now that they have acquired all these big franchises. Speaking of those franchises, especially Call of Duty. Call of Duty is one of the biggest things they're getting out of this. Activision isn't publishing a whole lot now, but it's primarily a Call of Duty machine. But we'll get back to Call of Duty. No, I'm sure that wasn't important, whatever that was.
Nope, not at all.
We'll get back to Call of Duty later on because it is something that I think deserves its own segment just because of how much money they're going to be making off it. But another important note is that King, the development studio, the Candy Crush people, gives Microsoft a big foot in the mobile gaming market, which they didn't really have before. They have their xCloud, which they're allowing you to play Xbox games on your phones, but in terms of games specifically developed for mobile, Microsoft didn't really have something like that, except for, there was Spartan Assault, there was a couple Halo games that were...
They're not even worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, which you can also play on console now anyway. But it's where Tencent dominates, so we're going to see if, Microsoft acquiring this, are they going to try to go after Tencent in that mobile gaming market? But yeah, this is the broad umbrella look at it. This is the kind of the big overview. We'll get into some of the details in just a bit. But were there any thoughts you wanted to add, just big picture about this acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, consolidation in the game industry really isn't new, and that's what a lot of people are concerned about with this. For the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen gaming studios gobble each other up. Left and right. Epic acquired Tonic in 2021. EA went on its own buying spree, picking up BioWare and all the other known studios in the last, 5 to 6 years. What's significant with Microsoft is that they're not just a game studio.
Mm-hmm.
They're a platform and a hardware manufacturer. So that's what's got a lot of people concerned, is that they can lock up a lot of exclusives with this.
Yeah, exactly.
But even the exclusives aren't that concerning because Sony's had exclusives for decades now, their entire intellectual property. When Sega liquidated their Dreamcast and their gaming systems, they basically sold off their intellectual property to Microsoft. They divided it between Microsoft and Sony, and each got a couple of pieces of that property. But like I said before, the deal's full impact won't be felt for a few years because of a number of existing licensing agreements. And, a lot can change in 3 or 4 years in the gaming industry.
That's true. Yeah, you're going to see these studios shift. A lot of these studios have big games waiting to come out. We have Overwatch 2. Overwatch 1 coming out in 2016. We've seen a ton of gameplay of Overwatch 2, but it's kind of one of those ones that Blizzard has in their back pocket that they're kind of just waiting to drop. Probably a guaranteed hit because, the Overwatch, I'm part of the Overwatch fan base. It's a big fan base, but we're hoping to see that soon with this acquisition as well. But let's we'll take a short break. We'll come back and get into the nitty-gritty details.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 16 of Insights into Tomorrow, where today we're talking about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision and Blizzard. So getting into the details here, Activision Blizzard has been making some questionable management decisions in the last few years, and this is something I wanted to put right at the top, just so we can kind of get it out of the way, because there is some controversy there that I think is worth talking about. Mainly from Bobby Kotick, the Activision Blizzard Incorporated Chief Executive Officer, or CEO. This is from Bloomberg, from Devon Pendleton and Scott Carpenter. Activision CEO is looking at a $375 million payout in the Microsoft sale. So Bobby Kotick will be getting his payout from this, and we'll get into sort of his behavior and why that is controversial, I think. Last year, Activision Blizzard Inc. Chief Executive Kotick, he received a 50% pay cut. This year, he's up for a $375.3 million windfall before taxes. Now, Kotick's time as CEO has been marked by a leader whose recent tenure has been I just repeated myself in the notes here. But his tenure has been marked by employee complaints over sexism, a hostile work culture, and mismanagement of assault claims. That's kind of the big thing here, why he's kind of had a negative light on him pretty much his entire time at Activision as CEO. As recently as November, he was the target of employee walkouts and petitions demanding his removal over reports he failed to make the company's board aware of allegations of rape and other serious misconduct. Now, since being CEO in 2017, Kotick owns almost 4 million shares of Activision. This is the most of any officer or director, according to their filings. The second largest holder is board chairman Brian Kelly, who owns 1.4 million through trusts and foundations, which his stake is at a value of $137 million based on this deal. So that's where a lot of this money is coming from. Now, were you aware of Bobby Kotick at all, just from any kind of press you might have heard about him?
I don't know how you could not have been with all the negative press that he had.
Yeah.
When the deal itself cut, it was interesting. The companies have been kind of playing the fate of Kotick a little loose, a little close to the vest. They only said that he's going to remain CEO through the 2023 fiscal year for Microsoft, which ends June 30th, 2023. What is interesting, he's quoted himself saying, is he'll be available if needed.
Right.
And I don't think he's going to get too many callbacks.
No.
But even if he doesn't, in addition to the stock buyout that he gets, he has an employment contract that entitles him to a severance package worth $293 million should he lose his job as a result of a corporate takeover. So this guy's walking away with well over $500 million as a result of this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you kind of hate to see come out of this, right? When we get into that discussion of corporate consolidation, is that, the bad guys that float to the top often get away, arguably better off than they were before.
Yeah.
If they're going at all, even. Microsoft, like you had said, were very wishy-washy about it, because that was one of the things, you think, oh, great acquisition. Okay, what happens with Bobby Kotick? Are we getting this guy out of here?
Right.
Because it's something that's pretty much universally agreed upon, is that he is not a great manager, and these sexual assault allegations and employee walkouts, the hits just kept coming. And it was, it's an interesting decision for Microsoft to say, okay, we're going to keep the guy around, but is that because we don't want to have to pay out $250 million?
Right, exactly.
But Kotick's compensation was controversial even before California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing sued the video game publisher in July, detailing a retaliatory, quote, frat boy culture. Earlier, the company announced it was slashing Kotick's 2021 salary and bonus in half in response to criticism. His pay package was excessively lavish compared with his peers. Kotick was also found in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, in which he used his company email address, and that's not a great look.
That doesn't help you or the company at that point.
No, I mean it's because I don't know why you would use your company email address. The hubris.
I don't know why you'd be involved with him in the first place.
True, yeah. But that's just one of the issues with Activision Blizzard. There are other problems as well in terms of union busting. This comes from Ethan Gack. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Ethan, from Kotaku. Call of Duty maker reveals plan to squash union effort. Activision Blizzard calls for studio-wide vote after refusing to voluntarily recognize Raven QA union. Now, Raven is one of the studios under Activision Blizzard acquired in this acquisition. But this comes from the Kotaku article, quote, 34 staff from Raven's QA department revealed recently that they were organizing with the Communications Workers of America to unionize, which would have been an unprecedented step for developers at a major gaming company. They called on Activision Blizzard to voluntarily recognize the union, which had supermajority support within the QA department. Now, this is where we get into company policy from Blizzard. Their policy essentially boils down to when a company refuses to voluntarily recognize the union, the organizers behind it must win a majority in an election ratified by the National Labor Review Board. Now, this would be a huge hurdle for the folks over at Raven. A hurdle that would have been easy for Game Workers Alliance to overcome within just the QA department, because you have a very small section of employees, would have been very easy to get a majority. By requiring all employees at Raven to have a say, Activision Blizzard is effectively arguing that either the entire studio, not just the QA department, but the whole studio of Raven, unionize or no one does. And that's kind of where you get into these wordsmith sort of, how we're going to use technicalities to kind of break up these unions. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's one of those things where, one, you're not gonna win against the union at this point in time. All these, if Amazon itself is fighting against the unionization of their facilities and losing, Blizzard's not going to win. And second, if you're trying to force the entire company to unionize rather than just a department, you're shooting yourself in the foot right there. Because all you're going to do is piss off all your employees, then they're all going to unionize, and then you're really screwed in the end.
Yeah, but Blizzard had another response to this. This comes from Nicole Carpenter over at Polygon. The situation developed even more back in November. Quote, this is from a company statement. In November, we began the process to convert our temporary employees to full-time employment status. This comes from Raven Software Studio head Brian Raffel in an email to staff. He goes on to say, now I'm excited to share that our QA colleagues will embed directly within various teams across the studio, including animation, art, design, audio production, and engineering. In the email, Raffel said the move to our QA team has been in the works for several months. Now, this splitting up of the QA team that was trying to unionize comes just 6 weeks after they were coming off a 6-week work strike. This makes unionization even more difficult. So these folks go on strike for the union, they come back, and the QA department is split up among all different parts of Raven, making it even more difficult to effectively unionize. Do you think, according to Raffle here from Raven, they say this was in the works for several months. Do you buy that, or is it just a little too much of a coincidence for you?
There's probably a grain of truth in there, because these guys, as monumental as some of the mistakes are that they're making, they're not stupid.
Right.
And when they started getting whispers that the QA department was going to unionize, the first way to do that is to liquidate your QA department and dissolve it into everyone else who's not going to unionize. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there was probably plans for it. I think the strike forced their hand and required them to basically pull the trigger on that decision.
Yeah.
I don't think they had much of a choice there.
Yeah, and this, as we're kind of alluding to here, the timing of these events is certainly interesting. The speculation is that this acquisition of Microsoft purchasing Blizzard, with the Gip hype moments of having all these franchises come to Microsoft, is that meant to overshadow the bad PR that Activision Blizzard has been getting for like 5 years now? Pretty much everything. There was even the thing with Blizzard, I don't know if I have it in the notes here, but where the controversy with China, where they were censoring the Hearthstone player when he was protesting China. And that was like huge news for like weeks. And it was all negative PR for Blizzard. And, it's kind of interesting. Sometimes you have to wonder, the CEO or the higher ups over at Microsoft, was there a thought of, is this too many bad apples? Is this too much of a bad PR move?
And I think there's little doubt that Microsoft is buying damaged goods, as far as the reputation of the company goes. The products they put out are solid. Microsoft's already looking to do damage control on the bad image. I had found a Wall Street Journal article where Sabina Menschel, who's the president of Global Investigative firm Nardello and Company, says there's definitely more diligence being done, particularly diligence being done around bad behavior on the part of Microsoft doing their due diligence. She said not only sexual harassment or misconduct, but bullying and other types of behavior, companies are a lot less tolerant. Microsoft being that. Microsoft knows that they're going to get a lot of press and attention, and they realize that their own reputation is on the line here. So the last thing a company like Microsoft wants is to inject itself with a cancerously bad culture that'll eat away at the rest of the company. Or, certainly more company profits than anything else. So Microsoft's not stupid in this acquisition. They kind of knew what they were getting, which is why I'm pretty sure they're so aloof when it comes to what the management of Blizzard's going to wind up looking like after all this.
Yeah, you want to be optimistic, right? You want to say they're being acquired. Maybe we'll get some management shakeups. We'll improve the culture. But especially when it comes to the gaming industry, the culture of crunch, when you have to get a game out and you're working, double to triple the hours that are healthy, and you're getting harassed at work. It's something that is all too common, especially in the gaming industry. So you want to hope that things will get better, but only time will tell. Especially with something as big as this, it's going to take years to see if there are any changes, what they might be.
Well, and honestly, historically, Microsoft doesn't have the best reputation with its game developers. It had a really rocky relationship with Bungie back when Bungie was developing Halo for them.
Yep.
So that was kind of a caustic environment there. Not nearly as bad as what Activision and Blizzard had, but it is. It's a high stress environment. I've worked in development environments doing application development. Game development is on a whole different level. You've got deadlines that are right off the bat unrealistic deadlines that are being set by salespeople, not set by engineers, and you're driven to the point of collapse by the time the end of the project rolls around.
Yeah, we're still seeing the effects of COVID with all this as well. A lot of these studios had to completely shut down and send everybody home with all their equipment, which, we're seeing that with games. I mean, probably the biggest one is Halo Infinite, Microsoft's arguably biggest title in years. Got delayed a whole year, to make the game ready. And to
probably needed to be delayed another couple of months, too, before launch. But
well, yeah, they're still staggering that content.
They delayed it for a year and then released 70% of the game.
Yeah.
And 30% of it was bugged.
Yeah. I don't know. When it comes to things like that, it's as a bit of an aside, I would rather it just take longer, just so you don't
Absolutely.
have to,
I'm the same way. I play in a game that's owned by EA now, Star Wars The Old Republic. They had a major content drop that was supposed to happen right after the first of the year, and they had to push it out another month. And it's like, it's okay. I'm all right waiting for that because I've lived through content drops that weren't ready, and it made the game just completely unplayable for a month or two while they went back to the drawing board and fixed it.
Yeah.
I'd rather stay with the old content and live with it, but still be able to play the game until it's ready to go.
And that's not even, the quality of the game and what you're dropping, the kind of content you're dropping is important. But giving it more time also allows the people making this content to not necessarily have to crunch and to have more time to work on it at a healthy pace. And I think that's a lot of the reason we're seeing the delays as well. So hopefully we'll see some more positive management decisions, but unfortunately only time will tell on that. Excuse me. But another big aspect of this is Games Pass. Now, for those of you that might not know, Xbox Games Pass is basically the Netflix of gaming. It's the thing that everybody calls it. And I'm sure they might already have that as like their official slogan, but if they don't, they should. But basically you pay a set fee every month. I think if you get the Games Pass Ultimate, which includes your Xbox Live Gold, which allows you to play online, what's it, $15 a month, I think?
Something like that, yeah. That's
Yeah.
playing.
But around that price, and you can basically download the library of games, which is like 100-some games, available to play. Now, you also get first-party Xbox Studio games, day and date, Xbox games with gold, EA Play as well, getting a lot of EA titles in there. And there's also Games Pass for PC, so you don't even have to have an Xbox to access a lot of these things because you can get it all through Games Pass for PC, which is a recent addition, but definitely a huge get, which also ties into this acquisition because a lot of these games from Blizzard are primarily on PC.
Yeah.
But some numbers for you about Microsoft Games Pass. This comes from Tom Warren over at The Verge. Quote, Microsoft Game Pass service now has 25 million subscribers, which is up from 18 million Microsoft reported in January of last year. So in just a year, you're adding 7 million more subscribers. And that's in a year where you acquire Bethesda, you get the EA deal through, so you can get EA Play, you get Games Pass on PC. That's all in a year, and it makes sense why they got 7 million more people on board.
Sure.
And that's not even accounting the Xbox first-party studios, those games that came out, like Halo, and I'm trying to think of some other ones. There was Rainbow Six, but I don't think that's another big game on Games Pass. It's not an Xbox exclusive, but
Right.
so you had a couple games drops as well to kind of justify those higher numbers. Xbox Games Pass is shifting how gaming companies look at revenue models. It's kind of changing the whole industry. It's changing it from being you pay $60 to $70 for a game the day it comes out, you have a physical disc, you play it, and that's it. Now we're kind of shifting to a more ever-changing thing where you have a library of digital games that you can then download, which some people aren't for because they'd rather have that physical media. Personally, I don't mind, except for when it comes to storage, because I know there's two different models of the newest Xbox out now.
Right.
There's one that has a disk drive and one that doesn't. You have the non-disk drive one. Do you ever run into storage issues with, having to download everything like that?
I don't. And I have the internal storage. I have the external NVMe card storage. Plus, I offload a good chunk of the games to the slower USB drive on there. So I've got plenty of storage. There's only the newest, latest, greatest games need to be played on the fastest storage. So they've provided enough options that it's manageable, and I'm not too worried about that. And I download all the games anyway. I mean, I couldn't tell you the last time I went to a GameStop or someplace else to buy a physical piece of media for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I have because I download everything. The second it comes to Game Pass, I'm downloading it to play just because I love video games. And, I think this is a great, this isn't an ad for Games Pass, but I think it's the best value in gaming because if you're someone that doesn't necessarily want to commit to that $60 purchase, you can get Games Pass and have over 100 games available to play like that.
Yeah.
And, you run into issues.
Not like that. You do have to download them.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, there is the issue, if you don't have the best internet connection or if you don't have the money to shell out for an external hard drive or things like that. There are some barriers to entry there. But you can still only download one game at a time, and, the Xbox can handle that if you're able to download it eventually. But like I was saying, this Games Pass is shifting how game companies are looking at the revenue models going forward. Sony is looking to compete with its PS Now service. It is similar to Games Pass, but not nearly as effective in the marketplace. And a big reason for that is because with PS Now, I don't think you can download the games. I think you have to stream them.
You're streaming them, live.
Which, even with a good internet connection, you can tell.
Yeah. Well, the latency, there's no way you can get around with the technology we have today. You can't get around latency. And latency, especially if you're playing like a first-person shooter or something like that, latency is going to kill you every time. Mm-hmm. There's no way you can get around the physics of you're trying to send a bit of data from your network all the way across the internet to some server somewhere else and might not even be your region. You physically, even if you are using fiber optics all the way, you're limited by the speed of light. And there is, people don't realize it, but there's this limit to the speed of light when you're trying to go across the country or when you're trying to bounce a signal off a satellite.
Mm-hmm. And talking about those online-only services, Xbox does have xCloud, which allows you to stream games from your console to either your phone or a tablet or something like that. And they have made significant improvements to that in terms of dealing with latency. But still, if you're playing, like you said, a first-person shooter or a fighting game or a racing game, something that is online multiplayer, you're going to notice it regardless.
Yeah, single-player games, you're usually pretty okay with it, but don't try to do anything competitive in player versus player.
Yeah. But Sony is looking to beef up their PSN Now service. This comes from Jonas Mackey over at Game Reactor. Quote, the creator of PlayStation 4 and 5, Mark Cerny, has filed a patent via USPTO for, quote, backward compatibility through use of spoof clock, I don't know what that is, and fine-grained frequency control. So basically, Sony's got some patents on the book for backwards compatibility. So it leads people to speculate that they are going to try to incorporate some more, PS3 games and PS4 games into PS Now to try to make it compete with Games Pass, while also maybe throwing in your PS Plus, which is the equivalent of Xbox games or Xbox Gold, basically the online component, kind of rolling it all into one package, just like you have here with Games Pass. Do you think that would be as effective as Microsoft's Game Pass?
It has the potential. I think the problem you run into is that game services is an area where PlayStation is playing catch up. Microsoft is leaps and bounds. They're 10 years ahead of PlayStation when it comes to this service and this ability. Microsoft PlayStation really abandoned their backwards compatibility as a serious concern years ago. As they were moving past the PS2, PS3, they didn't really worry about supporting backwards compatibility. That was an area that Microsoft really cashed in on because they knew all these people out there had this huge library of games, and they were going to be angry if they couldn't play them, moving forward. So Microsoft has been very good about that. And Microsoft, just to talk real quickly about the technology that they're talking about here, the spoof clock. So the problem with the newer game systems is they run fast, right? They're newer processors, they're faster clocks on the processors, and you need all that for the computation. The problem is when you try to run an older system on a clock that fast, it either doesn't work at all, or it works at a rate that you can't play that game anymore. So what they do is they try to clock down the processor on there so you can play it at the same speed as the old consoles. Well, Microsoft got around that by using virtual machines, which Microsoft brought in from their corporate world. So when you fire up, an old Xbox 360 game, it fires up a virtual machine and it runs in that virtual machine completely self-contained in there and fully functional. So they're not doing these gimmicky type things like PlayStation's trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is kind of a thing, right? That Xbox, when they announced that they were going to have 360 games coming to Xbox One at the time, people lost their minds. Because, obviously for the reasons you're saying, people didn't want to lose all those games.
You can go back and play original Xbox games now. They're making them compatible.
Yeah, as a lifelong Xbox and PlayStation fan, it's really, really cool to have access to those old games. Although I think Xbox announced recently that the last batch of what's going to be backwards compatible has been announced. So we are seeing that halt, but it's still a ton of games.
Yeah.
And even one game would have made it over PlayStation in this instance. But let's get into another big aspect of this, which we kind of teased at the beginning of the show. Call of Duty.
Let's take a break before we get into that.
All right.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
And we're back with Insights into Tomorrow. Today we're talking about Microsoft's gaming monopoly. So like I said before, I'm a little rambunctious. I thought I'd just plow right through. But, we got bills to pay, got to keep the lights on, so we had to run some ads. But we're back, and we're going to get into talking about Call of Duty. It's one of the biggest, worthy enough that they decided to put it as part of their banner here for the purchase. But it is Activision's probably their biggest game that they're currently publishing. Once again, Call of Duty Vanguard, which is the most recent addition in the franchise, was the best-selling game of 2021. This comes from the NPD, or the National Purchase Diary panel. That comes from its sales report for 2021, that Call of Duty Vanguard, #1 again. Which is interesting because it was critically panned and, fan panned. I don't know what you would call that demographic, but nobody liked the game. But it was still the #1 best-selling game, and that kind of speaks to why Call of Duty is such a valuable asset for now Microsoft to have in their pocket, because... And I could speak of this as a Call of Duty fan that kind of hopped off the bandwagon after Cold War, the last entry. Call of Duty fans are dedicated.
Yeah.
And
fanatical, I would say.
Yeah. And they're going to buy it regardless of what it is. People will pre-order the next Call of Duty before it's even announced what it is.
Yeah.
So when you acquire something like this, that's guaranteed money in your pocket. And in a second, we'll get into... Microsoft now has a lot of these titles where the fan bases are extremely rabid. But this comes from Eddie Momakuch over at GameSpot.com. that's a shame.
Just work through the name.
Yeah,
that's
Eddie,
it.
Eddie, if you're listening, I apologize. Change your name though. Quote: Vanguard was December's best-selling game of December and the full year, and the series has now been the best-selling game franchise for dollar sales for 13 years in a row. How do you feel about that? Because I could not believe that statistic when I saw it.
Being a fan of Call of Duty for 13 years, I could totally understand it. That's the one game a year. I don't play games nearly as much as I used to, but the one game a year that I always look forward to is Call of Duty. And Call of Duty is not released by just one development group either. They come out each year. It's a different group that comes out with them, and it's funny looking at the dynamic and almost the personality that you get from game to game. But it totally makes sense to me that you're going to have a group of people that are that dedicated to it, because the big fan base for Call of Duty isn't let's just play through the scenario and be done with it, campaign and be done with it. It's that online, cutthroat, super competitive, prestiging 20 times, getting all the bells and whistles and all the toys on my weapons and all the colors. That's what it is. And it's a reward-based system that they run on that keeps people addicted. It's almost like drug addiction, where there's always something for you when you keep playing. It's not like you run the content and the game's over. There's such replayability with it, with the online PvP play.
Yeah, and that's not even factoring in Call of Duty Warzone, right? Which dropped 3-4 years ago, but kind of became another battle royale in that battle royale wheelhouse that is just a cash cow for the folks over at Activision, because it's difficult for any game, especially a battle royale, to break out and kind of make its name. But you have the big three, I would say at this point. You have Fortnite, Apex Legends, which is also owned by EA, and now Warzone. So it's just interesting to think about how much money just Warzone alone is bringing in, which they've already said they're going to continue that, because of course they are. Why would they stop?
Why wouldn't you? It's a golden goose.
Yeah. But something else I wanted to mention about the Call of Duty thing is that now part of this acquisition, Microsoft now owns Major League Gaming, and I don't know for sure, but there's got to be a Call of Duty tournament with MLG, right?
Oh, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
So now Microsoft has all that stuff in house.
I'm not nearly that good enough to know where it is or how to play in it, but.
Yeah, so now Microsoft has all those. They almost have, it's like, the old Paramount decision with movies back in the 30s. They have the distribution, distribution, manufacturing, and what's the other one? Production, maybe. I don't know. There's three things that you need.
They produced them, they distributed them.
Yeah, they have all these. Oh, exhibition, that's what it is. For movies when you go see it in theater. But now they own, the Xbox, I guess, would be the movie theater at this point.
And that's really where that concern came from, was that you're not just looking at an EA buying up other development houses. You're looking at the people that bring this to your house, that you play on their hardware. They're now going to be a major player in producing the games themselves and locking up those games to a closed system. And that's what scares a lot of people.
Yep. For a little bit of context, here's the top 5 games of 2021. You have Call of Duty Vanguard, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, which was the one before Vanguard, Madden NFL 22, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and Battlefield 2042. Now, there's some variation in the numbers there because I don't think this accounts for digital sales, but regardless, 4 out of these 5 games Microsoft now technically owns.
Right.
And these are, semi-annual titles. Madden comes out every year and is another cash cow. That's, you talk about rabid fan bases. Madden's one of the biggest ones out there, and FIFA. Just the FIFA Ultimate Team alone is $1 billion industry. Yeah. And it's insane that now Microsoft now has Call of Duty, the sports games, and just that alone could make any company rich for years. But they've got everything else to back it up.
And ironically, the place that I think Microsoft is going to make the most money out of this in the short term is going to be mobile. Mm-hmm. Microsoft had no footprint in the mobile market itself now. And now they're going to be probably second place in mobile games at this point in time, just from this acquisition. That's huge. Just the microtransactions associated with the mobile games, huge cash cow for them.
Yep, because you have King with Candy Crush, and I'm sure King makes other mobile games. I'm not too familiar with them. But you also have Diablo. Diablo Immortal is a huge mobile game that no one was particularly happy about when it got announced. But it might already be out, or it's coming out. And
when you can have games that are terrible games by all accounts, and they still make a fortune, you know you're doing something right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when Diablo Immortal got announced, it was booed at E3. But yeah, that's another big mobile title coming out. You know, we're gonna see. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a variation on, you know, Warcraft, the original Warcraft, like the RTS, real-time strategy games, ported to mobile and StarCraft. I think all these things could.
They're perfect for it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, I would not be surprised at all. There's also Call of Duty Mobile, which is, I think, you know, it's still around, so it's pretty successful. But, you know, you're exactly right. I think we're going to see, you know, Xbox kind of maybe try to dominate this market, assuming it can compete with Tencent. That's also counting xCloud, which you can play games mobily, which I think is really cool technology, especially if you're someone that travels a lot.
I've not had a good experience with
really?
it, and it's more because of the controls.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's really tough to play a console game on a tablet or a phone without having a proper controller.
Yeah, that's kind of been why I don't use it often as well, because I have to hook up the controller to my phone, and it's like, oh, you've kind of lost me at that step. But you know, if they're going to double down on this mobile market, I could see them making, you know, an easier to use interface, or make games specifically for mobile that you don't have to worry about translating that controller
As
interface.
long as Microsoft doesn't try to make phones again, we should all be okay.
I had that Microsoft phone, by the way. I wanted that thing, and it was terrible. So yeah, I think they learned their lesson there. But we're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk more monopolies.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
We're back with Insights into Tomorrow, episode 16, where we are talking about Microsoft acquiring Blizzard. So we've kind of been leading up to this entire show, the discussion of monopoly. What does this mean for... What does this mean, Jenny? What does this mean for Microsoft monopolizing the games industry? Should PlayStation gamers be worried that they simply won't be able to play some of their favorite franchises going forward? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, they should not be worried at all. Sony just acquired Bungie, and that huge catalog of games that Bungie doesn't have.
Destiny 2, baby!
Yeah, I'm kind of puzzled at the Sony response to this. It was almost like hey, we need to look like we're still in the game here, so let's buy something.
Well, it wasn't a response, because these deals take months. Sony, it's a response in general to Microsoft's, you know, acquiring Bethesda, now this. But the acquisition game, the land grab in general, I don't think it's a direct response to this, but it is something that Sony is trying to flesh out their online presence, because, you know, you think Sony, you think single player, narrative focused, action, you know, adventure games. You have Uncharted, well, not anymore, but, you know, Last of Us, God of War, all these things, Horizon, Spider-Man, yeah, all these things that are single player driven. Sony really doesn't have a foot in that multiplayer landscape like Microsoft does with things like, you know, Halo Infinite's multiplayer, which is free to play.
Not exclusives, no. They're banking on cross-platform licensing like Call of Duty and stuff like that.
Yeah, but hopefully having Bungie, they can kind of flesh out that landscape, not just with Destiny 2, but I think they announced another IP from Bungie, kind of focusing in the multiplayer world as well. But Call of Duty has been confirmed to be multi-platform for at least the next 3 years, and I wouldn't be surprised if... Do you think we'll see an Xbox exclusive Call of Duty?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Microsoft would be stupid if they didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Do you think they would try to split it up and have it be single player only on Xbox, multiplayer Warzone everywhere else, or Warzone everywhere else, multiplayer single player only on Xbox?
I think you're going to see the whole thing just be on Xbox. Microsoft has very few bankable franchises that they can say are exclusives that they didn't themselves create already. You've got Halo. You've got, what else do you have? I mean,
Gears of War, which unless they make another game, is not super.
that's kind of getting long in the tooth there.
Yeah, well, we're on number 6. Well, 5 came out, but the next one would be number 6.
But Sony made their place in the gaming market with their exclusives. Mm-hmm. And they sucked up all the exclusives is the problem. When Microsoft went to start doing exclusives, there was none left.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that too, and like the focus of Microsoft has never really been on making, you don't have those like, it reminds me of like the 90s and 2000s where you had mascot games like Crash Bandicoot and
Sure.
Spyro. Sony kind of has that now with Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn. You see these characters, you recognize them from PlayStation games. Microsoft pretty much only has Master Chief.
Right.
I mean, you can count Marcus Phoenix and now Kate, I forget her last name from Gears of War. Those are iconic characters, but they're not nearly as beloved and as current as a lot of your PlayStation single-party players or characters.
So seeing Call of Duty go exclusive to Microsoft, I think, is a no-brainer.
Are we going to get a Call of Duty Halo crossover?
God, I hope not.
I mean,
it's possible given the direction that they've gone with some of the Call of Duty stories.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them if they think they can make money on it. I think us arguing whether or not Microsoft acquiring Blizzard Activision is a monopolistic move is difficult when they're solidly claiming the third place slot.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say you're a monopoly when you're third place.
Yeah, it's just, I think the biggest thing that frightens people and why they cry monopoly is because the independent game studio landscape is dwindling quickly. And you wonder if there's going to come a day where everything is either a Sony Studios or an Xbox Studios game, and if we're just going to lose that independent scene altogether.
Well, you will, but it's one of those things that's self-sustaining because I can go into business for myself. I can take out a $100,000 loan, start a studio, run it for 3 years, come up with something that's marketable, and then get a 100-time return on my investment and get bought out. So just as an entrepreneurial injector, those independent organizations are still going to continue going on there, if for no other reason than to be targeted for buyouts.
Yeah, the more I think about it, it is a lot like movies, where you had, early movies were not owned by anybody, but then you had big studios like Warner Brothers and others, and then eventually that studio system was torn down, and that's why you get more independent films like in the 60s and 70s. Are we going to see this with gaming where, these studios buy up everybody, we get these, a decade or two of all these console exclusive games, and then do we have a kind of consumer pushback against that where we'll go back to more independent publishers, or do you think we'll settle into this studio, grabathon?
The market never really allows the polarizing effect of one or two companies to run things. The corporate industries tends to migrate in that direction. I mean, even if you look at like retail, for instance. So everybody vilified Walmart because they came into every town and they killed all the small mom and pop shops. And then what happened after that? Then Amazon showed up, and Amazon's now killing Walmart. Mm-hmm. So now all the small mom and pop shops are like, well, you got to support your local businesses. So now there's a big push for all the local businesses, all your little bookstores and everything else. So the market is going to regulate itself more than the government is. The government's going to try and regulate it for purposes of, tax revenue and so forth. But the market doesn't sustain monopolies very well.
Yeah. Dialing it back a bit, by owning all these yearly releases, the ones we hit on earlier, the Maddens, the Call of Duties, the FIFAs, does Microsoft stifle competition? Because if you're someone that is a casual gamer, right, and you only buy one game a year, and that game is Call of Duty, and you own a PlayStation, is this something that Microsoft, whether it's not a real monopoly, not a total monopoly, are there some issues with it?
Well, the competition does not survive off of those guys that buy one game a year, right? The competition is spurred on by market growth. It's spurred on by market activity. And what you find now, the reason so many of these acquisitions are happening is because you have so many independent companies that put out that one gem. And everybody loves that for 6 months, and it makes a fortune. Well, and then you see someone like Microsoft go gobble them up. Mm-hmm. It's not going to stop those guys from producing that. You're still going to have all these small studios and individual efforts that are going to be putting out those brainstorms that you don't get that level of innovation from a corporation like a Microsoft or a Sony. You just don't get that kind of innovative design and out of the box thinking. This sort of stuff has been happening since the 1980s and through the 90s, where you get a couple of guys that start, like, you've probably heard of Sid Meier's, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Civilization, Pirates. He started, it was a two-man company he started. And they got huge. Then they were popular. And then when they got bought out, they created Microprose. And when Microprose wound up getting bought out, he went and started another studio. And when that got bought out for Axis, he went and started. So you're not going to stop people like that who can't, I don't want to say can't operate in a corporate culture, but they don't thrive in a corporate culture. They thrive in that small incubator type of environment. And they're going to keep going. They're going to build what they want. They'll sell it off. They'll build the next great thing. They'll sell it off. They'll build the next great thing. And there's hundreds of people like that are out there in multiple industries, not just the game industry.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you know, it was something I was worried about, because I think that just like with movies, again, bringing it back again, you have to have the independent element, right? Because if everything is studio mandated, it stifles creativity at the very least. So, you know, I do agree with you that I think we'll see that independent scene will still be there, and it's just a matter of, you know, when they make it big and get bought by Sony or Microsoft.
Everybody wants, you know, the old saying in the movies, everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame. Well, everybody wants their big break. Everyone wants their buyout here. So everyone's still going to keep building the stuff independently.
Yeah, there was an example I thought of while you were making that comparison. Drinkbox Studios, they made a game called Guacamelee and Guacamelee 2, side-scrolling platforming action game, really creative, really fun. Then they got bought by Microsoft, and they recently had a game come out called Nobody Saves the World, which was day and date on GameSpaz. But playing that game, you know, you worry a little bit that you're going to lose some of the independent charm, but they didn't. And so, you know, as long as Microsoft, if they're going to, you know, Microsoft and Sony, if they're going to buy these studios, if they can kind of remain hands-off and still let these guys work, but just have it be, you know, maybe a console exclusive if it needs to be at the end of the day.
Well, Bungie's a great example. Bungie was a fantastic small independent group when Microsoft went to them with Halo. They did a fantastic job with Halo, knocked it out of the park. Microsoft bought them, ran them for a little bit, stifled their innovation, and then they wound up breaking it off again as an independent group. Now they're getting bought by Sony, so, you know, some people don't learn their lessons, I guess.
Well, it's also important to note that they were owned by Activision for like 2 years, I don't know, forget how long, but they were owned until 2019 by Activision, which was also a terrible relationship
right.
that they were treated terribly with, and the fans hated it, and Bungie hated it, and I'm pretty sure Activision hated it. It was a bad time all around.
Yeah.
But Bungie can't catch a break.
BioWare, same thing. BioWare had a huge fan base of rabid fans because of the philosophy that the owners had, the quality of the product that they put out. They get acquired by EA. EA basically waters the entire thing down, slaps their little formula for development on there, and it's just a clone of what EA is now.
Yeah. Yeah, EA, we could probably do a whole other episode on EA, but they have similar corporate issues. But yeah, again, going back to Microsoft and the monopoly, Microsoft, of course, we talked about it on a previous episode. They faced criticism back in the 90s for its antitrust practices. Are they heading down a similar path? From McKenna Kelly over at The Verge, quote, and this gets into some of the details about the FTC. The Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission launched a joint effort to modernize antitrust enforcement, seeking comment on how the agencies can apply current law in cases against tech companies like Meta, which is formerly Facebook, and Google. The announcement came at a joint press conference from FTC Chair Lena Khan and Justice Department Antitrust Chief Jonathan Cantor, who described the move as a wide-ranging enforcement modernization effort. So we did an episode a while back about tech companies and their monopolies, and I think this is just another nail in the coffin of the FTC kind of getting wise to it and kind of changing legislation to better combat these deals. What do you think about that?
Well, and I think the problem you run into here is it's a change of administration. It's a new FTC that has to kind of make a splash here that it's anti-monopolistic, so they need an example, right? So the advantage that Microsoft has, though, is they're not in the center of the regulatory sniper rifle at this point in time. You've got two big companies out there that have really got everybody else's attention. So I think it's more a matter of timing. I think if Microsoft plays this smart, they don't rush this. They wait for Khan to get caught up in either a Meta witch hunt or a Google witch hunt and go after them. And I think the FTC's, the Biden administration is looking for a win, right? And if the big guys out there to get that win on aren't Microsoft, they're Meta and Google. So if they lock horns with one of them first, Microsoft will be able to get through without any real challenges, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Meta's already kind of taken a couple hits recently.
They're not doing themselves any favors.
No, it seems like every week they've had like the worst month ever.
Well, the fact that they even changed the name, I mean, that was just such a blatant attempt to put lipstick on a pig there and hope the government didn't recognize you're the same evil company.
Yeah, what they have their first quarter where they lost users.
Yeah.
Their revenue is down. Like, they're just falling apart.
Zuckerberg lost $20 billion on paper in one day.
Yeah. So you're right. If they're looking for someone to make an example out of, it seems like Meta might be the better target.
Well, and that's the thing. Not even from I hate to bring politics into this, but it's not even just from a monopolistic standpoint. Meta has a reputation from a perspective of influencing politics, and in a negative way for Democrats. And when you're facing a Democratic administration who needs a win, you've made yourself a very easy target at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it makes them certainly like you said, a much bigger target. While the announcement spans markets, it specifically, this goes back to the FTC, the task force they're putting together. It specifically questions how regulators should approach merger approval in digital markets, potentially setting new legal standards around data aggregation, interoperability. That's a fun
there
one
you
to say.
go.
I was going to say interpolarity, but that doesn't make any sense. And market consolidation that can affect competition. So we're seeing a bit of a really unprecedented time for when it comes to these kind of laws, because they have to change them for the digital market. It makes you wonder where these things will go in, say, 20 years.
The problem that you have is the wheels of government are notoriously slow. They do not keep up with technology. They do not keep, even from a medical standpoint, government regulation does not keep up with advances in technology, and it never will, because the bureaucracy itself doesn't allow it. What would take a development company, 6 months to put out a new piece of technology, it would take the government 4 years to catch up to that between legislation and debates and subcommittees and all that stuff. So for the government itself to be reactionary in situations like this is very dangerous from a regulatory standpoint. What the government needs to do is stop looking at this from a per company standpoint and look at it from an impact to the market and impact to the country and the citizens and everything else. Because only then can you react in a way that is slow but effective. And I think what you run into is the reaction that you get now is these guys are bad, so we have to do something about them. And legislation's never going to keep up with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because we talk about how slow government moves, but these tech companies move lightning fast in terms of, whether it be making acquisitions like this or by expanding their spheres of influence. So it's almost like it's oil and water in terms of how these two entities operate, and, how does that impact legislation, and how does that impact the amount of power that these tech companies are able to consolidate and aggregate. But as we're coming to the end of the show, do you think this merger is going to go through?
I think without a doubt it's going to go through, yes.
And do you think that this will be a footnote in the FTC's policy going forward when it comes to these kind of mergers?
I don't think it's really going to get much scrutiny from the FTC. It's not a questionable deal. We already talked about them becoming third. If they were number one after this deal, I could see it getting scrutiny. You can't accuse someone of being monopolistic when you're number three in the market. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If the merger, stepping out of the game industry for a moment, if the merger between T-Mobile and Sprint could go through because they were third place and that was part of the justification for that, then you already have a precedent set for it. So there's very little chance that it's going to get blocked.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it will go through. And, you were kind of at that stage where all this news broke, and it was a crazy month of hearing the headlines and what this means. But we're kind of at a point where now we kind of just hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
Where
yeah.
we see, because these things take years to figure out. What's the real question is, what are things going to look like in 5 to 10 years for Microsoft and for Blizzard?
And that's where you have to look, because even after this deal is signed, nothing's going to happen for 3 to 4 years. 5 years from now, I think you're going to find Xbox is going to be far more dominant in the gaming scene. PlayStation has traditionally always beat out Xbox as far as console sales and game sales. And I think if Microsoft doesn't come out on top, it's going to be a lot closer than it was. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is a lot of the reason why Microsoft isn't first is Microsoft tends to shoot themselves in the foot from a technology standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. Just the fact that they can't consistently name their consoles really confuses the hell out of people.
It's a branding issue, right?
That it really is. Every time they come out with a new console, they try to reinvent themselves, and it backfires every single time.
Yeah.
So Microsoft has their own flurry of mistakes that they continuously make over and over again that really impede their ability to be dominant. Buying their way to dominance is a new strategy, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to work because you got the same people making the same mistakes.
Yeah, and we talk about that strategy of buying, and it almost creates the image of Microsoft setting up all these dominoes that they're just waiting to push down. Because we have the Bethesda acquisition, Elder Scrolls 6, a big game from Bethesda, Starfield. I believe Starfield was confirmed to be an Xbox exclusive. So again, we go back to that 5 to 10 year benchmark. Is Microsoft going to have a decade where they're just releasing hit title after hit title, which people kind of think that they were going to do now with Halo, but that was kind of all they did.
and that's the thing, you can, just because you have an exclusive doesn't mean people are going to want to play it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem you run into.
Yeah, and you get the opposite of that with Sony, where people are going to play those games because there's a level of quality that is pretty much unmatched.
Yes, and Microsoft, if nothing else, has an infamous reputation of putting out poor quality code, whether it's operating systems, Microsoft Office, video game, doesn't matter. This was another folly of their marketing department. They marked the Red Ring of Death issue from the Xbox 360 by selling T-shirts with the Red Ring of Death. Now, if you haven't been in the gaming industry for a while, the Red Ring of Death was when the Xbox 360 came out. They had a hardware issue, a fundamental hardware issue that was causing the little Xbox power ring to turn red, and the game system basically became useless.
Yep.
And they stumbled on replacing that. It turned out it was bad solder. So they were using cold solder that was too fragile. So the solder points, just from the motion of the fans and moving the thing around, will cause the solder points to break. So they went back to the manufacturing process and they injected more, I think it was more lead or something, into the copper itself to soften the copper up. Well, and then what happened was, as you played the game over a period of time, the game system would heat up to the point that it would melt the solder, and you'd get the problem again. So they really, for the first 2 years of the 360, they really flubbed the whole thing until they fixed their manufacturing issues. The fact that they're going to mark the release of the 360 by using the Red Ring of Death on a logo, is just idiotic. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, it's like trying to claim something, right, and to make it better. But I think the memories, the wound is still too exposed.
Exactly.
To be doing things like that. I mean, now we're seeing that they don't have nearly as poor of a launch with the Xbox Series X and S. There is the chip shortage, which is affecting everything. But the
problem that you run into is, so you want to buy an Xbox Series S. Well, do you need to buy an Xbox One S? Because that's what a lot of people wound up doing and not getting what they wanted.
Yep.
So it's almost like Microsoft is deliberately confusing their marketing now and having people buy stuff that they don't want.
Yeah, it's definitely a branding issue overall.
How difficult is it? Xbox One, Xbox Two, Xbox. Hey, you know what? Sony did that. Nobody confuses their consoles, do they?
It's true. Well, that you also get into the whole discussion of what kind of company Microsoft wants to be, because with the Xbox One, they wanted it to be a multimedia device.
Right.
And Sony was never. They didn't care about that. I mean, they kind of tried it with the PS3, but it was still called the PlayStation 3.
Exactly.
Ultimately, it's there to play video games, which I think Xbox is definitely going back to that with the Xbox Series X, because you lost the bypass for your cable. That's no longer a feature.
Right.
And so I think they're definitely returning to their, I guess, quote unquote roots.
They're building a game system.
Yeah. And
Congratulations, guys.
I mean, the Series X is on par with something you can get on PC, right? In terms of specs, not like high end.
From a hardware standpoint, yeah.
Yeah. So they're going back to the drawing board and the basics, hopefully, and you know, we'll see the ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic and that chip shortage for years, in terms of actually being able to get your hands on these consoles. But I think that, you know, Microsoft is almost stepping past that with things like xCloud. You know, they continue to dump money into that.
Yeah.
I could totally see in a decade maybe, you know, the next Xbox isn't, you know, it isn't a box. It's like a Fire Stick that you just stick into your TV.
Yeah, that's hard to do. Google tried to do that, and Google Stadia
They're
just
early.
didn't take off with it.
Yeah, Amazon's doing it too with Luna.
Yeah.
You know, I think the technology just isn't there yet, right? But when it gets there,
The audience isn't ready for that yet.
that too. Yeah. I don't think it's a very hard sell to be like, well, there's no box. Well, how do
Right.
what do I do with this?
Here's $500 and a stick.
Yeah, it's a little bit of buyer's remorse there.
Yeah. Well, and the problems that, you know, not to go off topic too far here, but the problem that Google had was you would buy games through Google Stadia, but you never owned the rights to the games.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you'd pay full price for the game, and it was their game. You were really just borrowing it for $50 or $60.
That was where Stadia lost me.
Yeah.
But we will monitor this going forward. We'll see when this acquisition goes through, what's going to happen with it. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Insights into Things. Of course, I'll hit the show plugs for you again. You can always subscribe to everything on every platform, everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Amazon, Pandora. But we also, you know, want to hear what your thoughts are. What did you think about this acquisition? How do you feel about it? Even if you're not a gamer, in terms of a tech acquisition, how do you feel about it? You can email us at comments@insightsintothings. We're on Twitter at insights_things. We stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/insightsintothings. And if you have Amazon Prime, that means you do have Twitch Prime, and you can give us that free Prime sub. It really helps us out. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothings podcast, Instagram at insightsintothings, and finally, all this information and so much more at insightsintothings.com. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.